Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our special Budget Scrutiny Commission meeting. I'm Councillor Caroline Culver, Chairman of the Scrutiny Commission. Members of the Commission present this evening are Councillors Anthony Amatharaj, Dominic Bowick, Jeremy Cottam, Eric Pattenden, Justin Pemberton, Christopher Reid, Richard Sumner and Howard Wollaston. Other members present this evening are Councillor Ian Cottingham. Also present to advise and support the meeting, Paul Coe, Executive Director of Adult Social Care, Anne-Marie Dodds, Executive Director of Children and Family Services, Joseph Holmes, Executive Director for Resources, John Winstanley, Service Director for Environment. Is Shannon with us this evening? Remotely, thank you. Shannon Coleman-Slaughter, Acting Head of Finance and Property. Melanie Ellis, remotely, thank you, Acting Head of Finance and Property. Nikki Thomas, Service Lead for Legal and Democratic Services, beg your pardon. Gordon Oliver is clerk for the meeting, and the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, and Ben Ryan is the Zoom host this evening. I'd also like to welcome, we have 3 guests here from the Local Government Authority peer review who are with us this week and are sitting in the public seats. So they're here to observe our meeting and may not sit through the whole thing. So welcome, gentlemen. Okay. The meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, so members of the public are able to view proceedings. Please can I ask everyone participating in the meeting to make sure they switch on their microphones when invited to speak directly into the microphone and to switch them off when finished speaking. If we hear the fire alarm this evening, we must leave the building immediately via the emergency exit. The assembly point is the Dolphin car park. If the lockdown alarm sounds, we will remain seated and await instructions from officers. We will adjourn the meeting until such time as it is safe to proceed. Do members have any questions about the way in which this meeting will be conducted this evening? No, thank you, everyone. Do we have any apologies, Mr. Oliver?
Yes, Chair, we've received apologies from Councillor Paul Dick, and Councillor Howard Wollaston is substituting, from Councillor Ross McKinnon, and Councillor Richard Sumner is substituting for him. Councillor Jeff Mays and Councillor Jeremy Cottam is substituting for him, and also from Councillor Jeff Brooks.
Thank you very much. And we're also joined by Nigel Lynn, our Chief Executive Officer as well. Thank you. Right, do members have any declarations relating to items on the agenda? No. Okay, thank you very much. Right, before we move on to the substantive items this evening, this is our first ever special meeting where we look specifically at the budget. It's good practice to do this, so it's a learning experience. I hope we have a very productive and effective meeting. I did email members on Friday just summarising some of the things that I think we need to focus on. It would be really good if we could focus on long-term issues and not just look at a line-by-line scrutiny. We'll obviously have the opportunity to look at this at Executive on Thursday as well, and also at Full Council on the 29th of February. We obviously face a lot of challenges as a council long term with demographics and the pressure on social care and children's services and so on. So we can play a really effective role in challenging and looking at these issues. I did indicate some timings in that email as well, 30 minutes per item and an hour for revenue. Members have expressed the opinion that that might be quite long for each item, but we'll see how we go. It may be some of the smaller items we get through a bit quicker, but I know that revenue will probably demand the most discussion. So we'll see how we go. Thank you. So moving on to item 4, medium-term financial, no, I beg your pardon, item 3, investment and borrowing strategy. Can I invite Councillor Cottingham and Mr. Holmes to present this for us, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. So first of all, thank you very much really to Joseph and his team producing quite a detailed amount of information. So I think it's probably well over nearly 500 pages to digest. So hopefully no one has really gone through line by line, because if you had, that would have taken quite a long time. So what I want to do is just pick up some of the salient points for the investment and borrowing strategy. So section 4.5 details what the borrowing cost of West Berkshire Council is. So a bit of context for everyone in the room is that our long-term weighted average borrowing cost is roughly 3.5%. So with the Public Works Loan Board being just under 5% at the moment, hence the short-term nature of borrowing, not from a long-term perspective. So at the moment, we're sort of waiting for interest rates to fall down to that lower level. So we're in line with the weighted average long-term borrowing costs. So as everyone knows who invests, it's not timing the market, which is the challenge. It's obviously having the time in the market, which is really important. So that is the first item. The second item, just to highlight, is 5.9, the municipal bonds. So again, we were the first council in the country to do this, and we're looking again to launch a new municipal bond. I think next financial year, hopefully. Also 5.13, another alternative source of finance, which is the UK Infrastructure Bank, and 5.14, which relates to how we invest regarding the code, the potential code as well. So making sure that we are diversifying our risk in reality. So we're very much risk-based approach to investing and borrowing. Anything you would like to add, Joseph? No?
So thank you very much, Councillor, a very thorough summary. Just say, again, the purpose of this paper through to full council is for members to approve this at full council. It also sets out some of the investment limits as well that we have in there, where we can invest with different types of institutions and at what level, and it also includes a number of treasury management indicators as well, which in line with the CITFA's Treasury Management Code, we need to produce and ensure those go through to members too.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Members, do you have any questions, please? Councillor Matharaj.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Couple of questions from investment and borrowing strategy, either Joseph can answer. First, on the investment strategy, considering the tough economic climate and the underperforming retail sector forecast, what is the consideration for investment in terms of these assets going forward, and the risk profile of the council in terms of making sure that we're not going ahead with that kind of strategy to invest in the retail sector? Yeah.
So it's, yes, within these papers, it discloses obviously our strategy, our commercial property portfolio valuation as of the end of March 23 was just, it was 52.3 million, which delivers a net margin income to the council of just over £1 million, so roughly 1.7% return. As been discussed in previous scrutiny, we have been given the go-ahead to look at divesting that property portfolio, reducing the risk exposure to the council. The fact that we do have 9 assets. Yes, there has been a depreciation in the actual valuation as of the end of March last year compared to what we purchased. However, as central government has said, that the fact that this is no longer allowable to borrow money from Public Works Loan Board to then invest in commercial property for speculative gain, we will be looking to divest. However, it has to be at the right price. It's not a fire sale. We are looking to reduce risk exposure for the residents of West Berkshire.
Thank you, Ian. I'll follow up with the other question on the investment strategy. In terms of the investment itself, like it's across portfolios of different sectors. In all of these, what are the ethical considerations in terms of making sure is that the council does not invest in, say, let's say, tobacco products or kind of like products which are kind of like ethically and like kind of, are there any restrictions on the investments you're saying?
Yeah, so thank you very much, Councillor. So restriction-wise, if you go to 5.17, that sets out so the levels and where we are investing. We are actually only had a meeting a few weeks ago with an organisation who provides some level of ethical rating of certain investments. Because we don't have a particularly high investment balance, most of our investments go into, financial institutions or money market funds where there's not a specific equity investment. But even those institutions can be looked at and scored. So we are investigating how we can come up with a scoring through that. But each of those institutions that we invest with, they will have their own policies as well.
So the last operational meeting we had with the team, we are looking at external parties who provide this assurance that we're not placing monies with institutions who are then investing, as you say, in arms, smoking vapes, whatever, and they will come up with a score based upon where those funds are invested as well. So yes, it is very much on our radar to make sure we're not inadvertently putting money on deposit in institutions which are then investing unethically with our own aims as a administration as well.
Thank you, gentlemen. Councillor Berwick.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, Councillor Cottingham. In 5.3.0, the opening sentence says that the current economic climate has presented an opportunity to review the commercial property portfolio. What is it about the current climate that presents that opportunity? Surely we have an opportunity to review it, or we do review it regularly in any case. What is it about the current economic climate that presents an opportunity?
Mr. Holmes.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Berwick. So a fair point on the wording. You're right. We can review this at any time. The administration and members can do this any time. The opportunity, I suppose, that presents itself at the moment is because the interest rate, and so Public Works Loan Board borrowing rate is higher than it has been in recent years, then the ability to sell and forego that future capital financing need can provide us with reduced costs in the future. Whereas if borrowing rates were still down at sort of 1 to 2%, that opportunity wouldn't exist.
Thank you. And in the same paragraph, it talks about the revised property investment strategy is included in Appendix D. When was the strategy revised?
So in there is the revised sort of terms of reference for property investment, the Property Investment Board. That's been updated to reflect the changes actually the Scrutiny Commission made back in November time to not have a hard end date on property sales.
So has the strategy been revised, or is it just the terms of reference?
It's just the terms of reference, because from the strategy point of view, for over 2 years now, we've the council still does have the opportunity to purchase commercial property, but if it did so, it'd be banned from utilising Public Works Loans Board. So that element of the strategy has not changed. There's the last report to full council said no more purchases. So everything else in effect remains the same, except from those changes to the terms of reference.
Thank you, Chairman.
Any other questions, members? Councillor Pemberton.
Yeah, thank you. The report gives an estimated value of the commercial property portfolio as of March last year. Do you have an indication of where that sits now? I appreciate it's likely to be an estimate, but has it stayed the same, improved, got worse? Where are we up to?
Thanks very much, Councillor. So in the short term, our valuers will be going out to do that latest valuation as at the end of next month for the financial statements. A gut feel, I don't think I could say which ones have gone up and down. You can see in the report which was mentioned earlier around the retail conditions for property investment at the moment. So I would suspect there will be some movement up and down. There has been a reasonable drop last year. So I'd hope there wouldn't be a more significant drop for next year, but we will have to wait and see what our valuers say. The income of the properties has been very stable and positive, so that will assist.
Thank you, Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I think in Appendix C, the Montague Evans report states that the IMF predicts that inflation will not return to target 2% until mid-2025. I think Andrew Bailey was announcing last week may drop a lot quicker. Does that change any thoughts about what we've got reported, what we're thinking could be happening to the money markets?
Councillor Cottingham.
Yeah, so going back to Councillor Pemberton's question regarding valuation, obviously this is a book value. It's not necessarily going to be the price which you then receive on disposal. There's so many unknowns happening at the moment regarding the economy. We have an election coming up. Who knows which way interest rates are going to go. Hopefully they're going to go down, but in the short term they seem to be staying where they are. So we would be second guessing, but also we don't know who's out there regarding wanting to buy assets as well, find home for their money. So it's until you're actually able to test the market, you really don't know until you then find whether or not there is an interest in that particular asset as well. So hopefully we have assets which third parties wish to purchase. We do have a diversified portfolio across different sectors and also from a geographic perspective. As Mr. Holmes alluded to, so far we've had 100% rental income. However, we may find in the future a reduction in that rental income, which then puts greater pressure on that gap between what we're having to pay for interest and also the MRP against the the £1 million margin which we're making at the moment. And on top of that, also the assets will then require a sinking fund to be repaired. So these assets will need periodic investment. And I think the projection is roughly 2 million over a 10-year period. So making sure the roof is inadequately maintained as such. So as a buy-to-let landlord, we have the same obligations to maintain those assets in a rentable format.
Thank you. Councillor Cotton.
Thank you. Basically, a question about the collection fund and where it stands at the moment. Are we making good progress with bringing in funds? If not, are there reasons why it isn't?
I'm happy to answer that one, but I might want to answer it under the revenue budget, if that's okay. Councillor Cotton, hold on, but remind me.
Okay, thank you. I'll just ask a question if I may. In 6.4, it says that West Berkshire Council is a long-term borrower. Do we know how we compare with other councils in that regard? Yeah, Mr. Holmes, thank you.
Yes, we do. So BBC News did an article only a few weeks ago where they compared borrowing per council per head of population, so the total amount and per head of population. Oflog, so that's the Office for Local Governments, snappily named new institution that DLUC, apologies, another acronym, Department for Levelling Up and Housing Communities, has some useful information, so members can access that. It's all in the public domain, which shows comparative levels. Just for us, our debt levels through Oflog anyway are below the average level for other councils. LGA Inform has lots of information there as well. So there is lots of comparative information out there, but certainly as that table articulates, we have an underlying borrowing need into the future to undertake future borrowing. So as Councillor Cottingham said, at the moment, we are undertaking short-term borrowing in the expectation that PWLB rates will start to drop in the next year to 18 months. But at some point in the next probably up to 2 years, we are going to have to undertake some more long-term borrowing. We don't want to have, it's a sort of trying to get that balance between the amount of long-term and short-term borrowing that we have. At the moment, almost all of our borrowing is long-term. So we want to have a bit more balance of short-term in there so that we take some of the interest rate risk. But we want to have too high a level, otherwise we're really exposed to potentially future higher interest rates.
Councillor Cottingham.
Thank you, Chair. So just to order of magnitude, I know statistics can be a little bit misleading, but roughly the debt is around about £1,000 per head of population in West Berkshire. Some of the more extreme borrowing of councils in the country are at the £4,000 to £5,000 per head. So the ones which have been in the news regarding Section 114. So it gives you a little bit of order of magnitude.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Councillor Matharaj.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just ask a question about borrowing. Thank you. You mentioned about the bonds. Section 5.9 mentions about the municipal bonds. Are there any plans to consider options for retail bonds, issuing retail bonds for infrastructure projects, for capital projects? The reason I say it because it can be looked at two ways. One, if we issue bonds to retail sector, both domestic and foreign investment is possible, and it's kind of an attractive possibility that we get quite a lot of money in terms of investment for infrastructure projects. And then number two is we can look at that as an attractive investment kind of showcase as West Berkshire as an opportunity for investment from foreign as well as domestic investment. So what are the options? Are we thinking like from next year, like looking at that kind of option? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So the Local Government Association set up another three-letter acronym. The Municipal Bonds Agency, MBA, was set up a number of years ago, and its purpose was to try and group together councils who wanted to issue a retail bond together so that just one was issued to the market. Because the difficulty we've got is with the size of our capital programme, it's unlikely to be attractive enough to the retail market unless we issued, say, a 50 or £100 million bond. Now, we could probably balance that over a 2 to 3 year period, but then we would have the interest rate risk on that as well. So I think individually we might just be a bit too small for that issuance, unless we wanted to do like a really massive project. But the Municipal Bonds Agency was a good idea, so that you try and get authorities together and all issue one at the same time. I think today, I don't think it has issued a bond yet. Some councils, though, have issued their own bonds. There's not too many. I think Redbridge Council was probably the last one a few years ago. Transport for London issued them from time to time. I think Birmingham issued one quite a while ago as well. So some of the larger authorities have and can. It means getting yourself rated by the credit agencies, etc. So there's that upfront investment. But clearly there's opportunities there. I think the Municipal Bonds Agency is a good idea, but we wait and see what opportunity might come through that.
And just as a supplementary to that, do we think we might do any more of the community bonds like we did about 4 years ago? I think we raised some money for solar panels and so on. Do we think that was a successful initiative? Is that something that could raise money in the future?
I think it's Councillor Grosson alluded to a minute ago. So yes, so the plan is as part of our solar farm development over in the east of the district. The proposal would be to fund that part through the UK Infrastructure Bank, and then a much smaller part through another launch of a community bond.
Thank you. Because I think that was quite innovative. I don't know how many councils have actually done that. That was through Abundance, wasn't it? I think there was other councils that used the same mechanism.
I think it's about 10 off the top of my head.
Right. Thank you. Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you, Chairman. Just being picky on Appendix C, I think there's a typo. You've got average raised percentages, then got pounds underneath.
Yes, Councillor, you are quite right. Yeah, we'll amend that. Thank you.
Well spotted.
Thank you for that. Any more questions, members? No. Okay, thank you very much for that. In terms of summarising the points to be fed back, I think most of the comments have been clarification around the property strategy and sales. The point was made that the retail investments that we've made are perhaps not as good as some of the others that we've made. We talked about the municipal bonds and so on. Does anyone have anything that they would like to recommend to executive on Thursday? It's obviously only 2 days away, but if there are any recommendations that you would like them to consider from scrutiny officially? No. Councillor Williston.
Just to make the point that now is probably not the time to be selling commercial property if you can avoid it. We're at a low point in the cycle. And clearly there are demands for capital return to the council, but I would just be prudent about the level of sales as we are.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Any other comments? No. Okay, great. Thank you very much indeed. So moving on to item 4, medium-term financial strategy. Can I invite Councillor Cottingham and Mr Holmes to present, please?
Thank you, Chair. Right, yeah, so the medium-term financial strategy. So my sort of observations on this, it's great that we have a financial plan, but we're probably all well aware of the recent news 2 weeks ago coming out of DLUC regarding extra money. There is a very, very high degree of what we call known unknowns with regarding what's happening, not just for today, also next year, but going forward. So this gives us a bit of a steer of where we think the direction of travel is. But as ever, with any sort of forecast, it's immediately out of date. So it really gives a bit of context to where we think monies are going to be raised, and also where we think the spend pressures are going to be on the council. So as I say, we only just got yesterday the funding settlement, which gave us an indicator, so that unfortunately these papers are out of date. Apologies to this, it's just as you can appreciate the timing pressures which we have and the very fast moving nature of how funds are being delegated to councils makes these types of documents out of date. But one of the things which we are waiting upon, and Councillor Williston did allude to earlier, is the consultation document which the government has put forward regarding the use of capital receipts. So I think a couple of weekends ago, I had the pleasure of spending my Sunday afternoon going through the LGA response and putting a response through via Joseph to the LGA, making sure that the various risks of use of capital receipts have been evaluated by the government. So one of the things which, as I say, concerned about is where you borrow money short term just to buy an asset and then turn it into revenue and then you flip it back again. So we want to put some really constraints over that you don't end up getting into a high degree of indebtedness. As I say, this gives us an indicator as a strategy document where we believe the pressures are on us going forward, and hopefully that allows us to have a strategy to alleviate those pressures.
Thanks, Councillor. And just sort of picking up on that, so crucially within the MTFS, this shows £6 million of money going into our reserves over the life of the MTFS. So from our short, medium and long-term financial viability, from my point of view, that's absolutely crucial that we stick to those plans. Of course, if we overachieve against those, then so much the better. But that would enable us to rebuild our general fund reserve. And if there's anything excess the minimum level that are sort of set out, then that'd be very helpful to start rebuilding some of the risk reserves that we had previously as well. As Councillor Cottingham said, absolutely, it's just an estimate at time. But I suppose just picking up some of the sort of key estimates within this, we think at some point there will be some local government finance reform that has been on the agenda now for many years and does get moved out. Our assumption here in the MTFS is that implication for us is relatively benign. So we model in line with the Institute of Fiscal Studies assumptions of a sort of 3.4% real terms cut for local government spending. How that lands will be different across the whole of the country until we see what that funding reform looks like. It is very hard to say where we would potentially gain and lose through that funding reform, but we have to make some assumptions through that, and then we make some assumptions around the social care model, for instance, and then what is happening with inflation. Again, we make the assumption that inflation comes back down to around the 2% level into the medium term and hovers around at that level. As been highlighted in the past paper, that assumption will highly likely be wrong, but hopefully not too far away.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Any questions? Councillor Wollaston.
Can it was announced today that the local government financial settlement for 24-25 boosting local authority budgets by up to 4.5 billion. The up to is probably not terribly helpful, but do we have any feel at all as to what that might be as an impact on this authority?
Yeah, through you, Chair. So thank you, Councillor. So yes, the final settlement was announced yesterday. The government did about 10 days ago announce this additional boost to funding for local authorities of £600 million across the country. We estimated, and you see that the line you see in the MTFS is the line on funding floor guarantee grant. So very snappily titled, we assumed just under an extra £1 million through that and another £1 million through the social care grant. So we assumed that that would benefit the council by around about £2 million. Social care grant assumption was absolutely right. The funding guarantee was about 300k less than that assumption, but then a couple of unexpected grant elements seem to have been found. One about green plant machinery, which was a new one for me. But we think actually that £2 million estimate is going to be pretty close. I think it might be about £1.9 million more. But that has been beneficial to us when trying to close the budget and ensure that we're increasing our reserves as well.
Thank you, Councillor Wollaston.
And sorry, is that built into the current budget as assumptions?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Bowick.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Cottingham. In 3.4.2, you talk about some assumptions have been made in the MTFS. And you refer to adult social care funding, that it remains in the longer term with a nil impact on West Berkshire from the proposed care reforms in future years. I don't know what that means.
Yes, so sorry, Councillor, thank you for that. So that is where the government were going to put a very significant reform to adult social care last year. So the reforms around capping the amount of contributions that individuals would have to make to their adult social care. I think, Mr. Kerr, I'm right in saying those reforms delayed 2026-27 time, but I'll probably hand over to you.
At the time of the announcement, the statement was at least 2 further years, and that was about a year ago, but we've had no further indication from government that they're thinking about it again. So I think the 2 years was a very conservative picture, and likelihood is it won't be revisited in the near term at all.
Thank you very much. Councillor Matharaj.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Ian and Joseph. I'm referencing section 1.3, the main objective of the MTFS. It says that it's to kind of maintain the resiliency of the council budget. I fully agree with that. While it's at most important that we maintain the financial resiliency of the council, it's also, can you give us assurances to this committee as well as to the residents, is that the other services, particularly the people and places services, the adult social care and other services and infrastructure spending is going to be not affected, and it's going to be a two-way focus while it's maintaining the resiliency and also spending at the right places and making sure that they are ring-fenced and protected.
Thank you, Councillor. So, short answer to your question, I don't think, as I say, we have at the end of this financial year roughly £4 million worth of reserves. That's the projection, which is roughly 8 weeks worth of money. Sorry, 8 days worth of money. So just over 1 week. So if we were to have a significant black swan event, which comes from us left field, so we've seen a significant increase in unit costs for adult social care and also for children's family services. And we do have at the moment, I think roughly, is it 40 clients costing us £10 million per annum? So we don't need to have too many of those clients coming into West Berkshire's sphere of needing support care for the budget to be going into negative territory. And I cannot say to you with hand on heart to say there's a guarantee that there will be no need to find additional savings. I think I would be disingenuous by saying that, giving that guarantee simply through the fact that the state of finances which we face and the triage which we had to do this current financial year, as Mr. Holmes alluded to, we do have plans to increase those reserves. However, we have experienced a significant increase in, as I say, units coming into the council needing care plans and those unit costs. And that is partly due to the fact that the deregulated nature of children's services, that we do see speculative investors through venture capitalists, hedge funds, who are making significant profits. It has been reported in the press that one particular council is paying £63,000 a week to service a child coming into their care. So that is the risk which we face as a council. So I cannot give you that guarantee.
I think the figure about 10 million for 40 people is going to come up in the revenue budget as well. So we can ask some more questions then. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you. I wonder if you could comment on the sentence in 6.1 that talks about retained business rates being a significant source of council funding, but something over which the council hasn't got any control or no control over the rates being set. That sounds like a bit of a risk.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So yeah, through you, Chair. So yes, West Berkshire, we forecast to collect around about £100 million worth of business rates, and we retain around about £30 million of that. So we don't have control over either actually the valuation of properties. That's through the valuation office, nor the pence in the pound that businesses have to pay. So we have risks around appeals and individual businesses appealing, etc. And one really big risk we have around business rates is we are around about £10 million above the business rate baseline that the government originally set now over 10 years ago. As part of some of the finance reforms, there is debate, and indeed it was only in the Levelling Up Select Committee at Parliament last week, a helpful report there, setting out that business rates should be reset to a new baseline. If that happened as a hard reset for us, there's £10 million at risk there. So that is a very, very substantial risk to us. I think any new funding system, there will be a transition period to that, because there'll be so many councils up and down the country that would suddenly have quite immediate effects. But certainly the risk around the future of the retention of business rates is a significant risk to us. Probably more into the medium term of the MTFS, but certainly remains there.
Thank you. Just a supplementary to what Councillor Patterson asked. I note that we retain 100% rates income on all renewable energy schemes, which suggests that maybe we should consider doing more of those in the future. I mean, would we actually make very much money from those? It's all very well retaining 100%, but is that 100%, does that represent very much money?
Thank you, Chair. So it doesn't have to be our own schemes. So any schemes which that get planning approval for across the district, we retain that benefit. We do obviously have the sort of solar farm investment that has been proposed in the east. We're just finalising works for sort of going out to procurement and the final business case there. That looks positive to us as a net benefit to the council financially. Key thing is we own land there, whereas if we didn't, that I'm sure that business case would look very different. But across the district, we get to keep some of that benefit there, so that is positive for the council.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, gentlemen? Councillor Matharaj.
Thank you, Chair. Just one preliminary question on when we go into the revenue one. We can go into the detail, but just a clarification, Ian, if I may. Section 3.4.2, the assumptions. It says the new homes bonus, services grant, and funding guarantee are removed, but replaced with the funding system that delivers equivalent levels. What is that funding system? Is it the central government funding system which is expected, or something which we are not aware of?
Yeah, no, so thank you, Councillor. So yes, it's an assumption that services grant will disappear. So I think we're into our third or fourth year of services. I think third year. It was only meant to last 2 years in the first place. And new homes bonus, I think we're waiting for 2 or 2.5 years on a sort of response to the consultation on the future of that. Again, the funding guarantee is a relatively new separate government grant. So our expectation is where we sort of keep things flat is they drop away and something comes and replaces them that gives a similar funding level. For the funding floor, we assume that just drops away in its totality, but we will need to see what happens in the coming months and years around government funding reform before we know that is correct.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Holmes. If this is an unknown, can we have that as a risk and have the profile added to make sure that we have mitigations in place if we have a funding hole in that expected funding hole?
Yes, we can. I mean, that is a scenario. So that, if we assumed all of our funding disappeared, it'd be hard to believe that, I think, because there'll be some transition away to us having kind of zero central government funding again. But it's it is a fundamental risk to us. It could potentially be an opportunity. I suppose I'm loath to put too terrible figures in there at the moment, because it's very hard to base it on anything at the moment, because every year for a number of years now, we've just had 1 year settlements that just roll on from kind of what we had, the year before. And my suspicion is certainly for the next couple of years that may well continue until we get a new overall government spending review that may well then start to give us that 4 year certainty, which we had many years ago, but we've not had for a long time now.
Thank you, Councillor Cottingham.
Hello. Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to use accounting phrase of materiality as well. So yes, we're in a period where every penny counts, but for a medium-term financial strategy plan, 700k is roughly about 0.4% of the entire budget. So yes, it's important, but from a materiality perspective, it's not as significant if it being 7 million, for example. I think from anything over £1 million, we will, that's the level of materiality which we would be working against.
Thank you. Mr. Holmes, in an ideal world, what level would you like to see our reserves at?
Undoubtedly clearly higher than we have at the moment. So if you just look at how social care costs are going up, and we sort of link our minimum level of reserves to that level of demand, you'd expect my minimum level forecast probably by the end of this MTFS to be around the £8 to £8.5 million mark. On top of that, it would be excellent to have about £5 million worth of different risk reserves. for items, as Councillor Cottingham has said, if a new client comes into, especially children or education, social care, you can have, £500,000-600,000 worth of costs suddenly. And so having the time to adapt your budget to that through the use of risk reserves would be really beneficial. So yeah, absolutely. In this ideal world, general fund reserve would be up to sort of £8.5 million, which this forecast has it above that, and probably about £5 million worth of risk reserves as well. You don't want to go too far the other way and us hold 6 months worth of sort of reserves there, and suddenly we're sitting on nearly £100 million, and there's kind of questions about what is that doing in the future. Our reserves at the moment are too low. They do need to go up, and an ideal minimum would be that sort of £8.5 million plus £5 million of risk reserves.
Because they were significantly higher, weren't they? Page 111, I know I've skipped forward, but they were significantly higher in recent years. They've gone down quite considerably.
Yeah, yes, they were. COVID, the COVID years artificially inflated them because we had different grants and sitting in there, which they were then distributed and pushed out. But it'd be ideal to go back to some of our sort of pre-COVID levels of reserves. Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cottingham.
So from my opinion view, as someone who's in the role for 9 months, I would ideally be looking for anywhere between 3 to 4 weeks. So you're looking roughly £3.5 million per week. So you're in the £10 to £14 million bracket would be something I would feel comfortable with, and would allow us to have that flexibility just in case we did have, as I say, something left field which we need to fund very, very quickly.
Because we have faced quite a lot of challenges in recent years. We've had COVID and Ukraine and so on and so forth, and it's not outside the realms of possibility that something else comes along. So we do really need to be mindful of that, and that probably ought to be a recommendation to executive that they look really closely at the reserves.
I think, as you said there, Chair, that history has taught us over the short-term period that risks do occur. Financial pressures do occur, and we have to have that resilience back into the budget stroke reserves to be able to cope with items which do have a significant financial cost to us as a administration stroke council.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bowick.
Thank you, Chairman. You mentioned COVID and Ukraine. Well, of course, we actually did rather well out of that. We were well supported by central government. Indeed, some of our schools, future of some of our schools has been enhanced by having young children coming in who were fully funded by government. This discussion has kind of highlighted for me a point I was going to make earlier on. Throughout this document, it's mentioned that the council has a level of reserves that are some of the lowest in the country, and elsewhere it's almost saying that it is the lowest in the country. Yet we know that we are below the recommended minimum, Mr. Holmes, but we're there because we had to draw on our reserves, which of course is what they're for. So I'm just slightly concerned that there's a bit of haste here that I wonder whether it's entirely called for. We are replenishing the reserves as the previous administration had planned to, and indeed in 4.6 it mentions that the council already in the existing MTFS had a contribution to reserves each year to replenish risk reserves over the life of the MTFS. So would you like to respond to that, Mr. Holmes?
Yes, I think as I said earlier, I would not suggest that we'd want to be one of those councils that had like 6 months of reserves sitting there. You've got to play that balance out with, to generate reserves, we have to generate high levels of savings, say, or additional income, transformation, etc. So you have to balance out what that means against what the level of reserves are. But I think a minimum level of reserves, at our minimum, plus some risk reserves, is kind of the level that we've historically been at. And I think getting back to that would be very helpful to the council, because it prevents some of those immediate force changes that you have to make if you have no risk reserve at all, like we have at the moment. It's very, very hard to soak up any additional in-year costs.
So Councillor Cotton, come back on that.
Yeah, there's also another benefit to us as being an employer of choice. Any new talent wishing to join West Berkshire Council will have a look at our reserves, look at the financial stability, resilience of us as a council, as an administration. We all are well aware that there is a shortage of talent out there, and we've seen that through the high degree of agency costs which we're having to spend. And by providing that financial resilience, which then allows us to show that we are truly a going concern. If we are down at 8 days worth of reserves, it doesn't give us a lot of headroom to actually demonstrate that we are truly a going concern. And then, we don't have to get into capitalisation in 114. So this is all about us trying to build that headroom to cope with things which may or may not come left field from a risk perspective, which we have to react quickly to.
Okay, that's Berg.
Thank you. And yet, throughout this document, it talks about us having the lowest reserves in the country, and that comes across as a negative. It kind of not meeting your aspiration to be an employer of choice. So I guess my question is, does it matter that we're amongst the lowest in the country? Doesn't what really matters is that we have the level of reserves that are right for us. You mentioned that we have, or was it Mr. Holmes mentioned, that we have a considerably low level of debt. You did, Councillor Cottingham, a low level of debt per head of population. So that's a good thing. So it's not all doom and gloom. Why do we keep talking about this point of us having the lowest reserves in the country?
I suppose the reason I sort of reference it was in the revenue budget, but the reason I reference that is because I think it highlights to members from a comparator point of view that we are at odds with the rest of the rest of the sector. Most of, except from those who have issued a 114 report or in exceptional financial support, will have some of those risk reserves to pull on, and that is seen as any helpful practice for members to do so. Certainly, you're right, Councillor Bow. To an extent, the minimum level is the minimum level I set, and that's where we need to get to. But my point would be, by having those additional risk reserves, that gives us additional financial resilience, and that's the purpose of the comparator information. It's highlighting our lack of financial resilience compared to other similar councils.
Thank you.
Would it be useful, I wonder, if we had some statistics about the reserves of some of the councils that have issued a section 114 and the sort of historic, what's happened historically in the run up to them issuing that notice?
I can get those. The difficulty that you'd have with some of those councils would be that they thought they had much higher levels of reserves. So in some of the comparative information, it might actually show them having higher level of reserves. The other issue that we have is, because of the external audit regime, a number of councils, we've not had our account signed off since 2021. A number of councils have not had their account signed off since before that date as well. So some of the some of the comparator information, especially for those who are in exceptional financial support or Section 114 territory, might be slightly misleading. But absolutely can get that analysis. It is freely available.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Not that this is my specialisation or anything, but my understanding is things like banks and a lot of financial institutions do stress testing on ILAF and ICAP. Is there a requirement for councils to do similar sort of financial stress tests for kind of risks that might expect to come along?
Thank you, Councillor. A very good question. So purely from a stress test point of view, no. So that's why that's why I've set out what the minimum levels of reserves is, because I think and myself and my sort of 300 odd colleagues across the country do a similar exercise. That's the importance of that Section 25 statement to the revenue budget, setting out what we think some of the risks are. In all of these papers, certainly in the, especially in the sort of the capital and the treasury reports, you have some of those indicators that we have to report on. So that gives you a level of, I suppose from a stress testing point of view, it gives you some of that comparative information. So one of the measures is the amount of income that we get from commercial investment as a percentage of our income. So that's something the government have put in relatively recently. So that's kind of one of those indicators in there. One of the key indicators, and again, if you go into the Ofwat data, which I can send out to Gordon afterwards, so you can click on the link through that. One area that the government's really focused on at the moment is the amount of money councils are spending on capital financing, for instance. So the government's view is that has been too low in some cases. So some of that sort of level of repayment as a percentage of people's budgets as well. But similarly, a really high percentage would indicate a level of financial stress as well, because the council's having to always repay that amount on the assumption that there is a risk-free income against that, which isn't always the case.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No. I suspect there might be more discussion about reserves and appropriate levels when we come to executive on Thursday. Do we have any other recommendations we'd like to make to executive to consider ahead of the meeting? No. Okay, thank you. So that was exactly half an hour, I think. So moving on, item number 5, capital strategy. Councillor Cottingham and Mr. Holmes, would you like to present this, please?
Thank you, Chair. So this document details the capital expenditure plans for the next 10 years from 2024 to 2034. I'd like to precede it by just saying the fact that all sort of borrowing CapEx and investment really has to be affordable, has to be deliverable, and has to be sustainable. So we have a plan. However, it has to be realistic with it being affordable. We've spoken earlier about the pressures on the revenue budget, which come through regarding borrowing at Public Works Loan Board rates of over 5% and the associated MRP. Also, we've talked earlier regarding deliverability, and what I mean by that is having the resources within the administration, within West Berkshire Council, to be able to deliver. So we've, within the actual budget, we have, and also within the revenue side of things, is looking to make sure that we are managing our costs very, very closely. So it's not always easy to have the resources from a human perspective to be able to deliver all of the things which we would like to. And as I said earlier, it has to be sustainable. So it's not just a case of spending the money for the sake of it. And going forward regarding some of the divestment of our CapEx, our capital receipts, we can't be seen, as I say, from a strategic perspective, to blow it all on revenue funding, on where we've got overspend in various budgets. We've talked earlier regarding adult social care and children and family services. We have to make sure that we are investing for the future. So transformation, we are transforming the way in which we manage those revenue pressures coming into the council, understanding about early intervention, using new technology. We do have, as I say, a FTSE 100 company on our doorstep with Vodafone. They have their own, their radio access network, research and development is on our doorstep. And there's lots of things which we can be doing from a technology perspective in investing to make, as I say, way in which we do things more financially efficient, reducing those unit costs. So it's all about, as I say, investing for the future, transforming the processes which we have, and also looking at making sure that we are investing into infrastructure at the right places within the district of West Berkshire as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to add as well, so we've got some appendices in here. So we're making quite a big change to our MRP policy that requires change for 23, 24 and 24, 25. I think I've spoken to this committee before around that. Also, the sort of proposed flexible use of capital receipts policy in there as well. As Councillor Cottingham said, the government have consulted or put out some options on potential changes around how we can use capital receipts. And one of their proposals is that we need to produce an efficiency plan off the back of that. We will have to see what the outcome of that consultation is. That appendix will likely form the basis of an efficiency plan into the future. Includes some other indicators that I've referenced previously on sort of treasury and capital in here as well.
Mr. Winstanley, were you gesturing to speak? No. Okay, sorry. Okay, thank you, gentlemen, for that. Councillor Wollaston.
Yeah, I'm probably being rather thick here, but Appendix C didn't make an awful lot of sense to me. Firstly, I wonder what the capital expenditure incurred for 1st April 2008 is compared with the rest. I didn't quite understand the following point after that as well either. I just would like some clarification.
Okay, so yes, thank you. So yeah, Appendix C sets out that minimum revenue provision policy. As you can see from some of the comparative information, we have historically set aside quite significant capital financing costs through the revenue budget on our MRP, minimum revenue provision. So we've had an external review of this through our advisors to bring us much more back in line with other authorities' MRP repayments. So again, I've given to Gordon the offlog link. You can see on there we are right up towards the top of capital financing costs. So we've had a look at that to quite significantly reduce some of those payments, moving to a lower weighted average annuity basis on MRP, which in the short term delivers a saving. In the long term, it balances out. So, you know, that becomes a pressure into, if we had a long-term financial strategy over sort of 10, 20 years, you'd see that pressure coming back in. So it is a short-term benefit to us, but quite a significant one financially.
So is it fair to say this is robbing the future for solve the problem now?
So what this does, Councillor Wilson, is that the fact that effectively it's a technical accounting adjustment. So we have, in reality, overpaid in the past. And so what we're doing is we're just realigning it into a different method of calculation, which is which doesn't breach any accounting standard. It's been recommended to us. So all we're doing is, as I say, we prepaid the charge to the revenue account, and we're just releasing it back to the current revenue account for us this year. And if you look at the time value of money, in essence, we'll be prepaying that MRP back in later years, where it'll be, in today's term, worth off what it is today.
Can I make a further request? I don't know whether everybody else had the same problem, but if you look at all the tables on the pages previously, they're unreadable. So could we please have larger font size? Even with a magnifying glass, I was struggling.
Okay, thank you for that. So councillor Amatharaj next.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Corning, you kind of answered my question. I was going to ask on the long-term investments to attract businesses, like investing in telecom, like which we have a powerhouse, Vodafone at side, and then other telecom companies, investing in technology and businesses to attract West Berkshire as a kind of like major revenue source is commendable. And also I have to highlight, and there are a number of features in this document which is very thorough, very good, particularly just 4.2. If you see that the pie chart, you can visualize it and see like how much of that capital program is against the strategy, the goals, objectives. So you can clearly see that there is a lot of focus on the thriving communities, investing in the fairer West Berkshire against the BAU. So you can see, like, while we are spending on business as usual capital programs, we are kind of focusing on the core priorities, which is good. Just nitpicking on that one, it could be helpful if you could just add the percentages in it, so it kind of more easy to read that just numbers added by zeros towards the end. Just wanted to ask a question or maybe a suggestion from my side in terms of the 5.3 proposals for the capital strategy investment. If you look at the capital investments from the SIL and S106 funding, there's nil. I'm not sure about the strategy approach behind this, but it would be good to have that kind of SIL and 106 investments put into the capital investments. And to add on that, just to highlight, like, since coming from a parish as well, like, can we encourage parishes and the towns in West Berkshire to kind of more bid for that funding, more percentages from the SIL and 106? Yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
So through you, Chair. So thank you, Councillor, on that. So the reason that there's nil on SIL and 106 for the capital investments and investor save is because those items, I mean, most of it is investor save, and there are restrictions around what we can use 106 and SIL for. So that's why they get put against kind of the general fund items, so education spend, leisure spend, highways spend, etc. Where it's something that we're looking to do, which is cost avoidance, say, or can't do anything primarily for yield, but which has a yield return on it. That's why we just invest council-owned, council-funded borrowing for that. Now, if a scheme can be SIL funded, of course we would utilise SIL for that. But generally, for those investor saves, it's where we're doing something different, which might not be as part of what SIL and 106 can be used for. That's why.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bowick.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Cottingham, you mentioned, and Councillor Amatharaj picked up on this, you mentioned investing in, you mentioned specifically Vodafone's radio access network. Is that an aspiration, or is that something we have plans? Because I don't see anything about, is it transformation perhaps?
Sorry, slip of the tongue. So I didn't mean to say investing in Vodafone. What I meant is the fact that we can work with them. So we've had previous dialogue with them of how can we work together with certain ideas which we have both to improve work, which especially health at the home. So a good illustration is that there's other local authorities which have the ability to be able to see when a resident's behaviour is not normal. So rather than having to wait for someone to be reported, you also have that technology embedded in. And as I say, from a radio access network perspective, that is something which you would have the connectivity, because again, it's one of the key challenges, especially in the rural areas, of having the radio access network to be able to do that trigger. So it's more of a case of what ideas can we have together where we can be a bit of a guinea pig to trial some of their solutions, which they have with their own partnerships as well. So it's more an aspiration as an opportunity to work together. But we have had discussions with Vodafone.
They're not really a part of the capital strategy plan.
it's not embedded, but it's illustrative of the fact that aspiration, at the moment, and it goes back to the point of transformation, of trying to work how do we reduce the unit costs as a council. So it is an aspiration. So there's nothing set in stone in here to say we've assigned £1 million or £2 million, but as you know, this is a 10-year plan, and a lot of our energies are being focused on getting balance in the books in the short term, getting the budget over the line, and making sure that we're not going into a 114.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Chair. An observation, first of all. I see mention of London Road Industrial Estate through the paper. It's nearly its first anniversary of being renamed Bond Riverside, so I think we'd probably be reflected of that. I don't know whether there's a specific reason within the system that it's still being referred to as that. But also a question, and specifically around the 10-year plan. I can't see, although there is mention of solar photovoltaic throughout, I can't see anything for Bloomfield Hatch specifically, even in the 10-year plan. And I wonder if you could just clarify what that would be. I thought we were far enough down the road now in that conversation that it should be figuring over 10 years.
Yes, it is in here. I will find the exact line that it is on. So just give me two ticks, ask another question, and I'll tell you which line it's on.
It's in that small print.
Yeah.
It's in the small print.
I'll give you a chance to find that rather than ask another question, otherwise you won't be able to hear what the question is.
It's the pressure. Okay, found it. Yeah, so it's under renewable energy provision, and I'll give you the line on that on the page. Oh, someone just said. That was a nice thought. Thank you, John. 127.
Great, thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Sumner? Great.
It does.
Thank you very much. Councillor Matharaj.
Thank you, Chair. Just a bit of add of clarification, Councillor Boyd. I also didn't mean that we should be investing in private businesses like Vodafone. What we meant was encouraging businesses like Vodafone to invest, like, for example, coming from the technology sector, maybe their data centers to have land allocated or facilitate them to invest data centers and all this stuff. So that would be a long-term strategy to encourage businesses investing here in West Berkshire.
I just think it's better if we kind of focus on the paper and not speculate on what might be possible.
I'm going to ask a couple of questions now, if I may. I haven't written down which point it is. That's not very helpful, is it? 189.8 million external funding and 141.1 million debt. As a proportion of our the way we fund our capital programme, do we know how that compares with other authorities? Would they have such a large proportion which is debt funded?
Very good question, Chair. No, I don't know what that different balance would be.
Okay, thank you. And then a similar question. 6.7% of revenue spent on debt finance. Do we know how that compares to other authorities?
Yes, so I can give you that. Again, it'd be in the off-log information, which is sent around to Gordon. But if have a look, it's about 18 months out of date, their information. But our debt servicing as a percentage of core spending power, I think there's around about only 10 authorities of well over 100 upper tier authorities who are higher than us. And some of those are quite high profile authorities who have undertaken substantial sort of debt financing, for example, Warrington.
So only 10 are higher?
From what I can see, when you see it around, you can play around with it yourselves.
Okay, great. Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Cottingham, did you indicate that you want to say anything else?
Yeah, I think that's your question sort of reflects that the tight nature that we don't have a significant headroom to borrow money, which, sort of in my preamble, I alluded to the affordability, the fact that we have to make sure that there is the business case. And picking up on Councillor Bowick's earlier point over, okay, yes, we have one of the lower rates of borrowing per head, but the actual cost to us as a council is in the top echelons, and we can't simply borrow money to increase our reserves. It has to be for a particular reason, has to be for a capital project. But as I say, we're waiting for the consultation coming back from government, which they said they were going to announce mid-February, of how the disposal of capital receipts could be used more flexibly to alleviate some of the short-term pressures which we're facing across the LGA sector.
Thank you. Any other questions, gentlemen? Nope. Okay. Are there any particular recommendations we'd like to send back to executive as a result of this discussion? No. Okay. I'm sure we'll go over some of it again on Thursday. Right. Thank you very much indeed. So moving swiftly on, item 6, revenue budget. Councillor Cottingham and Mr. Holmes, would you like to present this, please?
Thank you, Chair. Right, what can I say? So a very, very detailed document, which I think is getting on for nearly 300 pages long. There is a significant amount of information within here, which sort of reflects the journey which we've had since, I think, midsummer, where we've had in this particular room the star chamber of going through virtually line by line all of the expenditure which we incur as a council. So just to give people who are not fully aware, i.e. our residents, as a council, we have over 700 services which we have to, which we deliver to the residents of West Berkshire. And also, as I say, that provides quite a complex business model. Coming from a corporate world, I must admit I was quite flabbergasted, the complexity of local government finance, plus what we have to deliver as an authority. So what we had to do was that initially it became very clear that we had £14.5 million worth of pressure based upon the extrapolation of where the year end would be with the number of clients which we have to support and service regarding adult social care and children and family services, along with the unit costs of inflation throughout this last 12 months. That then we had various ideas coming from officers, discussed with members, a bit of a star chamber, having that critical analysis. Out of that 14.5 million, we had roughly 1.5 million which went to public consultation. Again, that was a bit of a journey for myself, attending consultation at Hungerford, Thatcham, Burfield, as well as online. So lots of feedback directly and also indirectly. I think we had over 2,000 residents feedback to the online questionnaire. And certainly my own eyes were open to some of the suggestions and the impact. So one of the officers talks about the consequences of indirect actions. So you may think you're saving in a particular area Y, but in fact that then creates a pressure somewhere else within the budget. So we've spent a significant amount of time going over the savings, cost reductions. It's no administration wants to cut services, but we have to have this, as I said earlier, financial resilience within the budget to make sure we have the headroom to be able to cope with risk and issues which may come to us left field. So we believe we've honoured some of our election promises, not least finding money to reduce the green bin tax charged by £3. But also we've listened to residents of West Berkshire, what's important to them, and the fact is that this builds into the actual council tax increase, the maximum we're allowed to do so, which is 4.99%. That's just a fact of life where we are. That is in real terms still below what inflation has been over the last 12 months as an average. But as I say, we have listened and we have directed where we believe our priorities are, along with our manifesto commitment as well.
I suppose the only thing to add, the significant number of appendices, as Councillor Cottingham highlighted here. Some of them are ones from myself with a sort of 151 statement, responses to the consultation as well. Just highlight in the main report, you'll see some items highlighted in yellow. That's around sort of town and parish council precept changes, fire and police authority as well. So some of those numbers, well, all of those numbers will get dropped into your final papers that will come through for February the 29th full council. And as I mentioned earlier, we've got the final settlement now. So some of the numbers will change a little bit in here. But I'm hoping there'll be no material changes by the time it comes through to full council. So it should be a pretty similar pack of papers for you as members.
Great, thank you. Just a quick point. There's two figures given for our tax base. In the executive summary, it says 1.2 million, and in the introduction, it says 0.9. So there seems to be an anomaly there. I'll just mention that to begin with. Councillor Cotton.
Yes, you asked me to remind you about the collection fund.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor. So yes, so the collection fund consists of so the business rates and council tax that we expect to receive or estimate to receive during the current year, and then we have to have a look if there's an under or overachievement against that into the future year. Our collection rate is still holding out well. It's slightly down compared to before the pandemic, but it's certainly recovered quite well. The issue is the number of properties. So our assumption on council tax, for instance, is that there'll be more properties that have been completed across the district that it appears have been. We catch that up in the next year, but it means that a deficit will occur on the council tax side of things. Business rates, the previous year we had quite a significant surplus actually on that one of about £3 million. This year it's £1 million deficit. Again, not necessarily collection rate related. It's due to the change all the time of the underlying business rate debit that exists. If a property is revalued, then that reduces the debit down.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Councillor Bowick.
Thank you. A couple, Chairman. I just want to commend Councillor Cottingham for hard work that he and his colleagues did through the summer. I'm kind of familiar with what you've been through. In December, a few days before Christmas 2015, we received a devastating settlement from the government, which meant that we had to find even more than you did in about a third of the time. Mentions the parish expenses of XXXX pounds. Needs a bit of tidying up there. That's on page 89. I've got some others, but I'll come back. Sorry, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bowick. Mr. Holmes.
Yeah, as soon as we have those parish numbers, we will put them in. So it's just to reflect that at the moment we don't have them, but we'll have them in a couple of weeks' time.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, Councillor Mathoraj.
Yeah, it's a question from the revenue budget in terms of cost savings. While it's really appreciable to see the cost savings across different places and services, it's just picking up one point on the consultation as well. And so my question is on different places, covering different places, but just want to pick up one, the cost saving on the grass cutting and kind of making sure is that the open spaces, the weeds, so particularly coming from a rural ward and places where the gully, the maintaining of the gullies and the grass hedges and all those stuff. So I've read through all the consultation responses, and it's clearly been pointed out that it's kind of like safety issue as well, not just a look and feel issue, particularly in rural wards where there is just roads leading up to the main one. The side roads are just blocked by 1 meter hedges where. So it's important to focus on those as well and make sure that the safety issue is taken care of primarily. And also understanding is that there is no cost saving after the consultation on the drainage and gully cleaning. So that's really good, because the recent flooding has shown us that is really important to maintain the gullies. That is the observation I want to make, Chair, through you. So cost savings.
Thank you. Do you have any comments to make on that, Councillor Cottingham?
Yeah, as I say, through the process of consultation, there was roughly £1.5 million worth of savings proposed. After reading and getting feedback, I think we've written back 300k of those. So it's roughly 1.1 million, of which quite clearly we've seen the flooding across the region in the start of January, and we've removed that proposed saving on gullies clearancing. That's going to happen. Similarly, with the quite extensive feedback on waste bins and dog waste as well, not least receiving a 6-page report from a lady who looks after Greenham Common, who picked over 3,000 dog poo waste bags over her time. So she's taken quite a personal interest on keeping Greenham Common clean and tidy. She's got some interesting observations regarding human behaviour of where bins should be located, not in the car park and on the common itself, where for whatever reason dog owners won't walk back to the car park to take their bagged bin. They actually put it what we call ghost binning. So yeah, some interesting observations regarding human behaviour.
Thank you. I just mentioned on that, as a flood warden, during the recent flooding, it was apparent to me that a lot of members of the public aren't aware of their riparian responsibilities with regard to ditches. So I think in the long term, as a council, we probably need to think about how we inform people about that, because it may be in the long term that we can reduce the costs to us of clearing ditches. Obviously, we don't want it to sound as if we're offloading responsibilities onto the public, but the public do have responsibilities also. And I think a lot of the time people don't realise that.
So what, just to answer that, Chair, one of the discussions which came out through the public consultation regarding litter bins and cutting back grass and weed killing is this concept of the broken window syndrome. And quite a few authorities in the UK have this concept of adopt a street, adopt a postcode. Best practice, in fact, is actually Seattle in the US, where you can actually click on a particular street and you can see photographs of where the local community is working to make sure that their streets, their postcode is clean and tidy. So this is something which we have been discussing as a potential idea to actually get that concept of working together, of making sure that West Berkshire is a great place to live and utilising the assets which we have. Talking personally, I do cut my grass outside my own home, which is council land. I have a colleague who walks past my house who regularly notices me that the fact that my grass is cut nice and clean. But so I think there is demand out there. People will volunteer to look after their own street, postcode, whatever. So it's something which I think we should look to explore.
Any other comments, colleagues? Yeah, councillor Pemberton.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question, if I may. Can I ask about the green bin charge? And it's probably not the question you're expecting. It may even be a minor point. Page 197 of the report talks about proposals to stop printing and issuing the stickers for the green bins when obviously people take out the green waste subscription. I think most people would probably support the principle of that in terms of the effort and the man hours that goes into producing those. There's probably an element of waste as well in terms of the bit that doesn't go onto the bin. My question is, how does that work in practice? As in, when the operatives go out and collect the green bins, how do they know which ones to empty?
Well, they do have details of who has and who hasn't subscribed, so the contractor does. The drawback is it will take longer to do the rounds. So obviously, if they're checking that all the time, and you may get people who will chance it, I suppose, by putting their bin out, which will obviously increase the confusion. But we think it's a saving that should be taken.
Yeah, councillor Mathuraj.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. Just on the point about cost savings and it's like interesting ideas coming from public. A lot of people have leading up to the scrutiny committee or budget discussioners. I've got a couple of calls and emails to say how public can respond to in terms of suggestions. One interesting example came from a constituent was the bin collection from outside the school. Robert Sandlands in particular, the example I can pinpoint is that they can notice every week there is a bin collection by the VLA contractors. But what the residents have felt was that it's not needed. That's a complete kind of underutilization of the resources. Instead, it could be a community person who can volunteer to take the bin from there, and then you put it in their own bin, which is just a few yards away. So what I'm trying to point out is there are lots of interesting bits where this savings initiated by the council. It's also public would be more than willing to give some ideas in terms of cost savings wherever possible and help out. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm not going to talk specifically about that area, but I just think more widely, I think you're quite right. The budget consultation exercise has highlighted, especially with town and parish councils, for instance, where ideas have come forward around where they can step in and work more closely with us. I'm actually catching up with Mr. Winstanley tomorrow around that. We reflected that a bit in the budget papers, but again, at the sort of district parish conference last week, there was sort of views expressed from town and parishes where they thought they could do some more areas, and the council has a history of devolution, and I think this budget consultation exercise, I think, has re-energized that enthusiasm for seeing what further activity can be undertaken there.
Okay, I'm just going to interject at that point. I noticed in the papers that you haven't discounted the idea of parish councils taking on some of the bins. I know there was a lot of concern from parish councils about the continental contract, and there was evidence in some cases that they'd actually pulled up outside bins in various villages and then not emptied them, and that actually sat in the car and not done them. So I know that some parish councils have actually been asking to pull out of that contract and to have a refund. But I just would make one point on behalf of parish councils. If we do decide to go ahead with this and give more responsibility to parish councils, we need to give sufficient notice of that, because they will need to factor that into their parish precepts. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Councillor Bowick.
Thank you, Chairman. On page, let me find it now, 109, heading on 108, priority, table 1.3, priority investments. Home to school transport costs. So this tells me that council's administration is expecting to spend £700,000 more. Now, my immediate thought was, well, is that an extension to the service, or is it an increase in the costs? And then later on, further down in the tables in the document, it talks about you speak about a review of the home to school transport service and a saving of £100,000. So are we doing less and paying more, or what's going on there?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So that is reflecting the increased costs that we're seeing in year.
Offset by the 100,000.
Offset by £100,000 to a review has been undertaken to see where then savings can be driven out. But you see the net impact of that is a substantial increase into the cost of school transport.
And are the changes, are the reductions in service significant?
Thank you. So any changes around that would be subject to a sort of consultation exercise. That
Very good, thank you. Then I too noted the garden waste reduced charge, £100,000, and then I read the point about the about ceasing the production of the stickers, and you mentioned, Councillor Cottingham, a £3 saving on the bill, which it may be in here. I didn't pick it up. So does that £3 a head saving reflect the saving of the stickers? Is that what's covering it?
So to fund a £3 reduction from £58 to £55 will cost £100,000.
Yeah. And the stickers?
And the stickers save us £43,000.
So half them.
Yeah. So you're quite right to say that the net impact is 57,000.
Thank you. And then under business as usual, you're going to spend £60,000 on a customer experience officer. Sounds great job title. I couldn't find anything in there which told me what he or she will do.
Thank you very much, Councillor. So that is part of our digital approach to getting more of our services online. So from customers coming in to the council, they have greater access to our services, more services available 24/7, and through the channels that our customers want to access the council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cotton.
Yes, thank you. Following on Councillor Bowick's statement on the school transport, it's come to my notice that Reading have a different system to ourselves. We employ licensed taxi drivers for pick-up and drop-off. But it's been pointed out in Reading, they actually have a list of approved drivers suitably qualified and examined, and it finds it's much easier to actually get hold of drivers that way than trying to get from maybe a diminishing pool of licensed taxi drivers. It's just something for consideration I'd like to offer.
Thank you. Any comments, gentlemen, on that?
Part of the review we've had is obviously these taxis are on contracts, which we're sort of committed to this school year, correct? So it will be something which will be coming up to renewal probably in the summer, which we can then, under Anne-Marie's leadership, which has been looking at this very closely, to see where we can learn from best practice and, as I say, reduce the unit cost of home school transport, which I think everyone agrees has really ramped up and is very, very significant.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to let Councillor Bowick quickly come back in this topic and then we'll move on.
Thank you, Chairman. Very Thatcham statement there, Councillor Cotton. Most of the children are taken to and from school in buses.
Just a point of information, I think maybe most of the cost comes from those who actually take taxis.
Because my understanding is some people who need homeschool transport have quite complex needs and perhaps need the taxis rather than the bus. And I was told anecdotally that we spend £25,000 on one individual, and the officer expressed the opinion to me that it would actually be cheaper to employ somebody just to look after that person rather than to pay for the homeschool transport, which might be a controversial statement, but yeah. Okay, I'll move on. Yes.
Final comment on that. I'm on the school transport appeal board, and it often happens where there's such a demand out in one of the villages, I won't name them, that basically it exceeds the capability of the bus. So taxis are then used to do maybe up to 10 miles to actually take that child back and forth. I think it's certainly worth looking at. And yes, I am fully realise how much better a bus service would be. But if you put on if you have 4 over complement on one bus, do you take on the second bus? It's just a suggestion that we look at. Maybe this is another best practice that we could do, and it may also reduce the cost. I was given, for example, a policeman who was retired, and he didn't want to become a taxi driver, but he's very happy to do a morning and an afternoon run. And those are the type of people maybe we could expand our catchment of drivers for the school transport. Thank you.
Okay. One final comment on this, and I'm going to move on. Okay, right. So I move on to Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed on page 105, 8.6, the dedicated schools grant, there's after the table says DSG budgets are discussed in detail at the school forum. The forum has agreed to transfer 0.25% of funding from the schools blocks to the high needs block in 24-25, totaling 335k. Is that something we normally do, or is that a new thing that we've managed to get out of the forum?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So the maximum amount that could have been transferred over is 0.5%. In the last year, 0% was transferred across. So that was positive to see some more come across. As you can see highlighted in here, we have a significant deficit on the high needs block, and a lot of work has been undertaken across the council and with external colleagues. We're part of the Delivering Better Value programme, Department for Education programme, on looking at how we can reduce that growing year-on-year deficit on the high needs block.
Well done for getting the 0.25%. It'd be nice to see that increase, I think.
Yes, I mean, to get rid of the deficit is going to require far, far higher than that one. But yes, thank you, Councillor.
I think my point's been answered, to be fair. It's a historic question.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bowick.
Thank you, Chairman. Page 197, line, the reference E39, bridge maintenance reduction. There's in the coming year, there's a one-off saving of £80,000. Is that on maintenance? Is that a maintenance holiday, or is it because if it was an ongoing saving, I would have thought it would have been in the other column.
Yes, so thank you, Councillor. So per the budget consultation, that is a one-off saving. Proposal would be for the following year for it to be reinstated.
So if we can afford not to maintain a house, if it's safe to reduce maintenance in 1 year, why is that not an ongoing saving?
I think I'm right saying, Mr. Winstanley, I think it's about a 44% reduction in the annual budget. So from time to time, there is that opportunity, but we would want to rebuild that revenue budget into the future to ensure there's that ongoing revenue investment in bridge maintenance. But at points, there will be opportunities in line with surveys that we do on the bridges to take a pause on some of the investment.
Mr. Winstanley.
Yeah, just add to that, the bridge condition generally in West Berkshire is quite good. So we can afford to take a slight holiday, as you said, on the maintenance, but we wouldn't recommend doing that for too long, because obviously bridges are very important. And we would, it would probably cost more in the long term if we extended that investment holiday further than the 1 year.
Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify how that aligns with the £400,000 capital investment for the year for bridge improvement and other structures.
Well, this is, of course, is revenue funding. So this is mainly to do with sort of access for surveys and things like that. So we will maintain the 400k capital, which will be towards improving the asset.
So in effect, it's where it's already been surveyed and you've identified the work to be done.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? No, okay. I've got 2 or 3. In the chart on page 109, there's nothing bullet pointed next to point 4, a prosperous and resilient West Berkshire in the charts. Is there any reason why there's nothing listed there?
Yeah, as a thank you, Councillor. So it's yeah, where we have had quite limited investment this year. Yeah, that is an area that has is not proposed to have new investment for this year. Not to say it might not have new investment in future years at all, but at the moment we've not allocated anything against that priority.
Thank you. Page 295 regarding transport for people who need to get to day services. And about the recommended increases in charge, the fact that some of what we do in that regard isn't a statutory responsibility. Can we guarantee that nobody is going to miss out on the opportunity to get to those services?
So thank you, Chair. This was something which I was, I think probably the correct word, lobbied quite intensively. I do have, let's say, at each individual face-to-face, the unintended consequences of, as you say quite rightly, us charging for the service, and then people would potentially miss out on their daily care package which they receive from a third-party provider. So a very good illustration is that up at Newbury Rugby Club we have Interact, and we have a number of vulnerable adults who the fact that they've never been able to work full time themselves, so they rely on that particular service to pick them up 7 or 8 times a week to take them, gives respite care to their parents. So we don't want the scenario whereby we effectively are charging an individual and they then have no money left at the end of the month, so they're having to make a choice themselves whether or not obviously they get PIP payments, and we don't want to be seen to be taking everything away from them. The initial idea, which we've talked about, is to make the first 3 journeys chargeable. We're just going through the process of see whether that's feasible from an IT perspective, that 85% of people who use this service use it 3 times or less. So in fact, we're actually doing an inverse of income tax. The more you use, the less you pay from an economic perspective, but we're reflecting that the fact that we don't want to penalise the most vulnerable people within our community for this. So we're looking at various solutions for both a short term and long term. So long term, hopefully we can get the IT infrastructure software change. Maybe we have to do a short term fix regarding how we charge. We do a reduced charge initially, and then we move once we've gone through the testing of everything come the summer as such, that we can put something into our IT infrastructure, which you can appreciate. It's not quite straightforward as we would like to do.
Okay, thank you. So we're very mindful of that then, the risk.
Absolutely. And it's something, as I say, listened to and very much taken on board and fed back, that this could be an unintended consequence of us charging, that we'd have individuals who would no longer be able to afford to go to their daily care, which then would have a knock-on pressure regarding parents, and then potentially have a further knock-on of those children then being returned to us for such a little saving, which they would be delivering to the council, which then, as I say, has a higher cost to us than the actual saving which we've made.
Okay, thank you. And a comment about housing costs. I'm aware that we're going to be purchasing some housing, but we obviously have long-term pressure in terms of putting people into B&Bs, hotels, etc., etc. Are we looking at how we can reduce those costs in the long term? Because it's unlikely that they're going to come down, they're probably just going to go up.
Yes, so thank you, Chair. So yes, we are actively purchasing some properties. So through the LAF scheme, Local Authority Housing Fund, a scheme for displaced persons, we've been purchasing properties already, and we're also looking at what other opportunities there are more widely in the market too. And so we hope to report some of those hopefully in the next few weeks. Yeah, as you rightfully say, costs are rising, so it's important that we are active in the market to see what opportunities there are to reduce some of those costs. Up until this financial year, it has not been a substantial financial pressure. It is undoubtedly growing in the current financial year and may well do into the future if we don't take further action. So it is a really important one, which is certainly growing up our risk register.
And do we have a timetable for when the houses we're purchasing for displaced persons will become available to local people?
So some of those people already are in the district, and I can't say property by property the exact time, but certainly into the medium term, we would, once they've been vacated, they are then available as temporary accommodation for the council to utilise.
Thank you very much. I don't want to dominate. Are there any other questions before I ask any more? No, okay. I'm conscious of the long-term demographic challenges we've got as a council and any council regarding adult social care in the future. Obviously, we've got an ageing population, and I'm also conscious we have 40 people who are costing the council 10 million. Now, it may be that they're not just adult social care, they might be children's services as well. But would it be possible as the Commission to get some case studies about the kind of costs that are being incurred? Obviously, they would need to be very carefully anonymised, but I think it's always useful to have case studies to sort of bring to life these challenges rather than just looking at figures on a screen.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse. If you see, it's page 100 of your pack, that sort of shows our top 10 sort of service users for those 4 respective areas. But yes, I'm sure we can bring some anonymised data to highlight the sort of care needs and challenges and costs for those individuals to, I'll let you liaise with Mr. Oliver around how that might work. But yeah, we can provide those.
Thank you for that. Councillor Cottingham.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. You're very correct to say that the fact that lessons learned, we have to understand what that cost base is, what's driven it, how they come into our sphere of care. Could there have been other things which we could have done earlier from a prevention perspective to, as I say, alleviate those pressures, but also other things which we could do to actually get them out of care as well, so quicker as well. So it's not just a case of getting into the system. It's also managing them. What's the best solution for them, best outcome as well. So, yeah.
Thank you. I think the issue of prevention is something that we ought to keep at the forefront of our minds going forwards. We've got a healthcare on major developments task and finish group at the moment, which is an offshoot of Health Scrutiny Commission. And the theme of that has very much been prevention. So how can we ensure that developers comment in a timely fashion on planning applications, for example, and public health and the NHS comment on them in such a way that we ensure that we've got the GP surgeries we need, public health services, et cetera, because ultimately we need to do much more prevention, I think. And then last but not least, I was just going to mention, one of our colleagues mentioned about the high needs block. And the concern over the increased costs around that and special educational needs. I'm conscious we've got on our work programme special educational needs, and I think it might be timely for us to look at that maybe at the May meeting and get an update. I don't know if Ms Dodds, if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, happy to do so, Chair, and we'll bring in the detail of the Delivering Better Value programme as well, which should have commenced by then.
Great, thank you very much indeed. And I think we've got an ASC care strategy as well at some point that's coming through the pipeline. So maybe if we could get an update about that whenever would be a good time, I think that would be sensible. Okay, great. Any other comments? No, wonderful. I'm sure we will have a very robust discussion about the revenue budget when we come to council on the 29th of February. So last but not least, we have item 7, the revenue financial performance report for Q7. Councillor Cottingham and Mr Holmes, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think we've probably covered off quite a lot of detail within the MTFS regarding the extrapolation to year end. So I suppose the headlines looking at this is that there has been a small reduction from Q2 to Q3, down from 3.3 million overspend to 3.2 million. It would have been nice for it to be more. We have seen a significant progress being made on reducing agency costs, going to one provider. FRP continues to meet on a weekly basis on a Thursday. It's been very instructive to understand the workings of the council, so it's been a very, very good way of understanding how we spend money, why we spend it, and putting greater internal control and financial resilience and accountability, peer reviews from a finance perspective. So it's interesting to get officers' challenges as well, which has been taken in a very professional way. I think that the organisation is pulling in the right direction. There's been a marked improvement in the quality of paperwork being produced for them, which has reaped its benefits. I suppose it's a continuing theme regarding the year-end reserves being 4 million, which equates to 8 days. It does feel sometimes a bit like painting the Forth Road Bridge. The fact that you stop or whack-a-mole is probably the better analogy, where you're whacking down a cost down and the cost appears up. Good illustration, the pressure which we find in children and family services, where you get a new case coming in, which can wipe out quite quickly the savings which we're making in one particular area. But as I say, there is definite realisation within the organisation, the need to make sure that costs are under control, that we do have to deliver to this projected 3.2 million overspend. And as I say, we're waiting news from the government regarding the flexible use of capital receipts, whether or not we can potentially use more of the capital receipts, which we may or may not have this financial year, to offset this revenue overspend, which then will put us in a better footing to start the year from a reserves perspective.
Thank you, Mr Holmes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The only thing I'd add is to reference some of the authorities there who have issued a 114 report or requested exceptional financial support. I was having a quick look earlier this morning, and I think of similar councils to us, so unitary councils like ourselves. I think at about 17% of total unitary spend at the moment in councils, or is at councils that are subject to either a 114 notice or exceptional financial support. So that's so nearly £1 in 5 across similar authorities to us, is at one of those authorities, which I think just shows the scale of the financial pressures that us and our colleagues facing across the country.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Councillor Matharaj.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Holmes and Cottingham. Just looking at the table under 5.42 on the spending on the agency, there's certainly reduction in the agency spend, as you said, Mr. Cottingham. That's really appreciable, and that's pleased to know. I can understand spending on the child and family services and communities and well-being, but the agency spend on development and regulation, environment, commissioning and procurement, finance and property. So are there any examples you can give, why we are spending on agency and this one, and then subsequently are they going to come down?
Example you've got in there, so development regulations planning. and finance property, sort of accountancy or sort of property specialists. And I think in those areas, what you're seeing is where we've got specialist professional staff, just as the same with social workers as well. There is a lack of staff available to fill posts. So as part of the FRP process, we're ensuring that we're going out for recruitment to recruit into those posts, and sometimes there is just a sort of when you go out, there is a lack of people available. We will and historically have always had a level of agency spend. We will always have that, probably across most of our services. People hold post vacant absolutely where they can do an internal restructure or some acting up arrangements. Absolutely, we have those to try and reduce that agency spend cost. And agency spend cost is coming down, but for certain key posts, there is that requirement to keep services running that we do dip into agency staff.
Okay, Councillor Pemberton.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can you tell me what percentage of all posts across the council are currently vacant and how that sort of compares to comparable authorities? It may not be data you've got access to.
So I can't tell you right now, but at the Personnel Committee, those stats are going there. So I can't remember off the top of their head, but those absolutely are coming to the Personnel Committee. So that shows the number of vacant posts. Trying to get comparative data, we can try and have a dig around of other councils who issue a report like that, but I'm not sure how many issue something similar. So I'll have a word with Mr. Bogos and see if there's a way of getting something comparative.
Okay, thank you. And recruitment and retention will be something that we're looking at in our work programme as well. So that issue, I think, is quite important. Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? No, okay. I think we should thank officers and the executive for the efforts that they've made to reduce the in-year deficit, and especially around agency staff as well. I think quite a mammoth task has been conducted there. With regard to the transformation programme, I had a presentation from Officer Gabrielle Mancini the other day about how that's going, and obviously that's going to play a very big part in bringing down some of the costs that we've got. And I think it would be quite good if we had a presentation to Scrutiny Commission at some point, whenever it's timely for Gabrielle to give us an update about that, because it's quite a significant programme with about 6 elements to it. And I think it would be very useful for us to have more detail. Great. Thank you very much. So that brings us to the end of that item, and indeed the end of the agenda. So thank you very much indeed, everyone, for your comments. We've managed to do it an hour quicker than I anticipated. So thank you very much for your conciseness in your questions and comments. And for the benefit of members of the public, this will be discussed at executive on Thursday as well, and that will be on YouTube. And also the full council budget meeting is going to be on the 29th of February, and that will also be on YouTube. So thank you very much indeed, everyone. And if you could wait until the live stream has ended, please.
We're no longer live.
Thank you very much, Mr.